everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We are a few members of the Seed Code team, and we're excited to tell you a little bit about what we do as our development process and defending our time as developers. So I'm Casey. I've been a Seed Coder since 2016, and I'm mostly on the phones and answering the initial emails that come in. And one interesting thing about me is I just recently moved from the northwest United States down to Querétaro in central Mexico.
Hey everybody, my name is Ann Kaiser. I've been with Seed Code since November of 2017. My role here at Seed Code is manager and developer with custom FileMaker projects. And I live on a 25-acre farm in Oregon with my husband and 26 animals, I think. Before doing developing, I was actually a horsemanship instructor, and that's what the picture is there, is of a live demo that I did in Texas a number of years ago with me and my horse Bandit.
Hey everybody, my name's Dan Whelan. I've been a Seed Coder since 2015. I'm really missing my beautiful family right now, but it's great to be here with everybody and already having fun connecting with other developers. Back in 2017, John Sindler, our Seed Code CEO, gave a well-received presentation on what works. Was anybody able to attend that session? Cool, so a few of us, awesome. So that really sparked some fun conversations about kind of the methods and habits that we're committed to at Seed Code. And we had great conversations after that, and we really like to kind of continue that conversation today. So we're looking forward to chatting about what we've learned as Seed Coders and kind of some of our experiences along the way. When I joined Seed Code, we were just a team of 4, and John, Jason, and Tanner really graciously supported me kind of as I learned how to respond to support requests for our products, and also how to manage kind of our short-term projects we call mods. And right from the start, I realized I joined a culture that really cared about our customers. We spent a lot of time talking about how to respond to and communicate with our customers, much more so than like talking about doing the actual coding. And that wasn't because like I was some great FileMaker developer. Like some of the times the most difficult challenges with working on these projects are things like communicating expectations with customers, talking about money, and managing our own time and stress. As I'm doing these small mods, I often found this to be the most difficult part of doing that kind of work. But now that we're a team of 9 at Seed Code, we've been growing. Casey and Ann have really leveled up our product support and our mod work, so that they've standardized communication around with our customers, put a lot of effort into our project planning so that we're consistently delivering great work, keeping our customers happy, and they're learning how to keep their stress down, keep themselves happy at the same time. And that's kind of like the goals for every project, right? We want to be successful, but also keep our own stress down and keep that managed, right? So although like I tried to manage these challenges in my own way, and we were learning that process at the time, like I often found myself having to, after the fact, communicate some expectations with our customers, right? Like as I don't know if you had the experience, you deliver on a project, and then a couple months later, a customer wants some tweaks to maybe a button behavior, right? Or but then they also want to talk an hour of next steps. Did I communicate that those next steps were going to be billable, or am I going to like eat that time because I didn't properly kind of set those expectations at the start? It's interesting that I've transitioned now to working full-time on a single long-term project, and like at least the top 2 challenges, right? Like they're no longer like big issues. It's like after the beginning of a project, we've already kind of set expectations. Talking about money is no longer like a big issue, and that's really cool. But why is that for these longer projects that becomes a less of an issue? I think at Seed Code, one truism that we really hold to that helps us set up for success early on is small chunks. So small chunks work. Our customers purchase small blocks of time up front. We talk about their priorities, and then we deliver small chunks of code. So like every 3 to 10 hours, we'll deliver an update for our customers. After a few deliveries, the customer starts to become confident in like the value that we're delivering. and the pace that we're going, right? So questions about value and cost and expectations, those become answered in the code that we're delivering on a regular, frequent basis. As a FileMaker subcontractor before joining SeedCode, I got to work on some projects where I met with the customer once or twice before the actual delivery, and any meeting with the customer, and much more so at the final delivery, like I was just weighted with stress. Like, is my customer going to like what I built? Is my contractor going to like what I built? Did I even build the right thing? Meeting more frequently with customers, there's like a different kind of pressure being high touch, but I would gladly choose that, like if I know that I can be confident in the direction the project is going and my customer can have that same confidence. So now that I'm full-time on just one project, we have to take things in small chunks still. It's still critical to how we work. We meet weekly with the customer, deliver weekly for the customer. We talk about the new work that I've implemented. We take in new work. So because we're delivering weekly, I get to offload all that stress around delivering, right? Like, so I'm only carrying kind of 1 week's worth of weight about the code that I'm working on. So I'm free from that stress of that baggage of, am I building the right thing? But there's still plenty of stress around delivering weekly. Sometimes I feel like I have to implement a certain feature that we've taken in within that 1 week. So I put pressure on myself to make sure that that happens. But I'm learning that that's just another opportunity to kind of apply this small chunks works, right? So I can't deliver this whole thing, so what parts can kind of hold off until the next delivery? That way the customer can still see what we're working on, still get a sense of where we're going, and then if we need to correct course, we can, because we're delivering on a weekly basis, and that's really important. Having the ability to deliver just the important stuff, or the most important things first, and then also having the freedom to, like, if something goes wrong and we need to abort any one delivery, the ability to do that really makes the rhythm of delivering weekly sustainable. So there are a few other important habits that we're committed to at SeedCode that I just want to touch on. We can keep chatting about it. They may be simple in principle, but they're kind of can be difficult in practice too, right? So we cut to the chase with binary questions. We want to give the customer a clear yes or no option as quickly as possible. So I don't necessarily have to have a full understanding of where their project is going, but if I understand that first chunk, then I can send them an estimate and get the project rolling right away. We communicate timestamps, not dates. So I confess I often said things like, I'll have this update for you by the end of day Thursday. And while that's like better than the times that I would say, I'll have your file for you sometime next week, it's still like really ambiguous for myself and for the customer. And I don't know about you, but I would often depend on that ambiguity so I could work until 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. and still get the customer their update like before end of day. But if to them their expectation was 5 p.m. or even 5 p.m. Eastern, and I'm over on the West Coast, then I've already broken their expectation, even if I've technically met my own. So instead, we communicate timestamps, a date, time, and a time zone, and like that was really difficult for me at first. Like I'm willingly imposing an explicit deadline on myself. So why is that helpful to me? Well, I'm forced to better consider like when I can actually get the delivery done, right? So I need to ask myself, what is my capacity? When can I get this done? And I'm hopefully in the process eliminating those chances of like breaking some kind of unsaid expectation. Once we've made one of these timestamp promises, they have to go on the calendar. So this keeps the whole team informed and helps me hold myself accountable to the promises that I make. The calendar is where we can see what's coming up, and it helps me determine my capacity. And also, like if I'm properly looking ahead, I can see if maybe I'm not going to make one of those deadlines that I had set with the customer. And then rather than 1 hour before my promised delivery, I can request maybe some more time halfway through the project, a few days before I had committed some kind of delivery. So we stay ahead of those potential scheduling issues. But I'll have Casey share some more about how we use the calendar and some other tools we use to work on these successful projects.
Thanks, Dan. So as I mentioned, one of my primary roles in the company is the first line of support, answering phones and responding to people's emails with support questions in them. And I make a lot of those promises to customers. And so how do I stay true to those promises, make sure that I'm getting back with people? A lot of that, for me, has to do with the tools that we have available to us. So the first tool that we have on here is FogBugs. That's our case management system. And that's where all of our emails come in. And immediately we have a 2-hour window of when we need to give an initial response to that customer. And then after that 2-hour window, if I have something that I need to follow up with that customer with, I would normally have been setting the due date in the case management system. But what I was finding was there's an issue with that in that I wasn't getting email notifications, or I wasn't getting notifications on my phone for when the event was actually coming up. It depended on me being inside the case management system to remember that I was responding to these customers. And so it wasn't working 100% of the time, or even close. So what we, as a team, one of our recent policies is that we are always putting things on the calendar, as Dan mentioned. And we use our Dayback calendar, and one of the biggest reasons that we use the Dayback calendar is that we can script custom functions inside the calendar just like we would in FileMaker Pro, and that's not something that we can do in Google Calendar directly. So one of those examples that I've got is a custom button action, so that when we make these promises on the calendar, we can make them quickly. This was something I was a little resistant to at first, because it takes time to create an event in the calendar. So we'll go ahead and show this example here of a custom action that I created. We can copy the link in FogBugs in our case management system, go over to the calendar, create a new event, and then open up our custom actions tray, and we've got a button there for follow-up. And what this is going to do when we paste in that case link is it's going to extract the case number from there, update the title of the event with my name or whoever's creating the event, and set me as the resource and the status of pending, so that we have this promise to the customer on the calendar and we get notifications when that's coming up. So connecting the tools. So this is kind of the fun part for me, is we have all these tools available to us, but how do we use them together? And so our first example here is going to be FileMaker and Dayback. We have our own custom FileMaker solution that Jason and Ann created, and Dayback is able to connect to that solution and display the data in more of a visualized way for us to be able to take advantage of it in a different view than just data inside the FileMaker solution. And then we've got FileMaker and FogBugs. FileMaker and our case management system synchronizing the data in between so that we can see the time that customers have purchased, and update the items and delivery schedule that we have set for them. And finally, we've got one of my favorite things that I'm a little bit proud of is our integration between Dayback and Zoom. We use Zoom for our meetings with customers, our screen shares. And so I've created a middleware system that Dayback can connect to. And you can see here we've got custom buttons for creating, deleting, and starting the Zoom even directly from Dayback. And when an event in the calendar is modified, that also updates the meeting in Zoom, and it synchronizes everything. And we have, you can see that along with the other custom action, this one updates the event details with the title and the details of the meeting, so we don't even need to go into the Zoom interface. And one other tool that's extremely helpful in managing expectations with customers and clearly communicating with them is our snippets. Snippets are predefined blocks of text that we can automatically paste into replies to customers that we've developed as a team, the conversations that we've had over time with our team, and make sure that we don't have to think of the phrasing and the wording on everything to reply to the customers, especially when it comes to uncomfortable situations, talking about billing, delivery dates, and how we work. And it's just a really important tool for de-escalating stress between us and the customers. So one example that I've got here of a snippet, it would be when we have customers that come to us, we're close to delivering an initial delivery that we had scheduled with them, and they've come back to us with a few emails with additional requests and things that they would like to address. So I'll go ahead and just read this off, the whole snippet. How we would reply would be, we're close to delivering these changes under estimate, but I realized that I didn't estimate enough time for this correspondence we needed to get us here. Can we defer digging into your last emails until we've delivered this work? Or would you like me to dig into this now and deliver what I've done so far, knowing that we can pick this up as part of your next implementation package? So that clearly explains to our customer where we're at, what our concerns are for us and for them, and it's all something that we have predefined in our tools without having to work on that phrasing ourselves every time we reply to an email. So now I'm going to have Anne step up, and she can talk to us about how she manages her time in the development process.
Great, thank you, Casey. For some of you, if you can't hear very well, there are headphones over on the right-hand side that you can grab if you're having any problems hearing. So as a developer, I have a weekly target of 25 billable hours per week that I'm responsible for each and every week. And starting out, I really felt just a ton of stress, feeling overwhelmed, that there just was never enough hours in the day to get everything done. And I thought at first that maybe if I just became a faster developer, that I'd be able to get those 25 hours a little bit easier. And I found out very quickly that that was not the case. And it wasn't any one particular quick fix, but that it was actually a combination of strategies that I needed to start to utilize and implement and find for myself. And so what we're going to do is talk about those kind of one by one. So what is billable? Like really getting a clear definition of that for us internally and for me personally as a developer, so that I can be applying my time appropriately as I'm working on customer projects. QA and what the role is of QA within that parameter, blocking out my time as a developer, and then also scheduling projects and keeping track of those projects as we go along. So we're going to look at these in a little bit more detail here. So in terms of what is billable, the first thing that I needed to do was to really find the value within myself. And what do I mean by that, right? So first of all, I had to give myself credit for the FileMaker skills that I was bringing to the table, which is probably easier for some of you than others. That was one piece that I kind of struggled with a little bit. But also getting comfortable with the idea that regardless of your skill level, oftentimes the development process isn't always a straight line, right? Sometimes you start down a pathway, trying something to find a solution, you end up having to backtrack, try a different pathway until you get to the end result. And that's a natural part of the development process. And that is absolutely a billable part of the project for the customer. And then the last thing is that, again, regardless of our level, no one person knows everything. And so doing research, looking up API documentation, reaching out to your team members, asking questions, getting help, that is, again, all part of the process, and again, is all considered billable time for the customer. Is the customer getting value out of that time being spent? Absolutely. So the next piece of it is the communication side of things, and we want to be building customers for life, for long term. And so what that means is that we've got to invest that time with the customer in really understanding where it is that they're coming from, what their business is all about, what they're struggling with, what their pain points are, and taking the time to invest in that relationship from the very beginning of the project. And that's very valuable information that's going to help us set them up for success for the long term. We need to understand what their expectations are, not only of this particular project that we're working on, but what the overall vision looks like, and ask those clarifying questions about, kind of really digging in. And then the last thing is being able to communicate our timelines and process and our progress on things, as Dan kind of talked about, again, kind of keeping that relationship and that communication wide open. And that, again, is very valuable for the customer, and we consider that all as billable time. So the last piece of this is quality assurance, QA. And this was another piece that I really struggled with. Because I'd do testing and I'd find an error, and I really struggled with like charging the customer for me going back and fixing some of those errors or some of the things that I missed. If I was a better developer, I wouldn't have made those mistakes. If I would have just slowed down just a little bit, I wouldn't have made that mistake. And again, just kind of coming to the understanding and having the confidence in recognizing that that again is absolutely a part of the process. And as we're going to talk about the QA process a little bit more here, but especially as we kind of step away from the project as a developer and look at it as an end user, different aspects come into light during that QA process that are very valuable to the customer. And so, kind of that QA and kind of bug fixes beforehand are absolutely a part of that, again, of that billable process. So we do our QA maybe a little bit differently than what some of you may do or that you've been exposed to. And so I'd like to talk about that in just a little bit more detail because it's actually one of the pieces that has probably escalated my development as a FileMaker developer more than anything else that I can pinpoint exactly. So the first thing is with QA, when we're building out our projects, again, as Dan said, 3 to 10 hour chunks typically, want to have a very finite list of items that we're going to be addressing for the customer. Okay? I should be able to put a check next to each one of those items, whether it's completed or not, so that as I'm going through developing and working on that project, I have that very finite list. And then this is where maybe we deviate a little bit differently, and you may have heard John Sindelar talk about it at a previous DevCon presentation that he did several years ago. But what we then do is we do a video of each and every one of those items. And that video, what it really allows us to do is we step away from the file as a developer. Okay? The video is not about showing all your scripts and all of your layout objects and all of that sort of thing. It's about stepping back into that file as a user, as the customer. Is everything aligned? Does that button turn bright green when you hover over it that maybe you hadn't even noticed before, right? That is in total contrast to the entire rest of their solution. So how, does all the buttons go, kind of where you went? Is there any, moments that you have as you're doing that video during that QA? And if there's a moment, then that's a cue that we need to jump back in there and get that fixed up. The team then reviews those videos. So I'm not the one reviewing those videos. I certainly try and watch them, right? But so I make the video, and then John or Casey or another member of the team is actually the one that does all of the QA on those. And what this does is not only allow the team members to find potential errors or have their own moments, right? That's certainly helpful and valuable. But what it also does is give them a chance to see the cool stuff that you're working on, offer ideas about what else maybe we could do or what proposed next steps for the customer for the next round of work, and to harvest out blog and marketing material. Hey, that's pretty cool. I bet some of our other customers might really like to see this. And I stepped over one of the other items of this, I think that Dan was waiting for. Very good, Dan, thank you. Is that when you do the QA, we're going to do the entire process. So let me give you an example. So just last week, I added a new field into a customer's solution. Pretty straightforward, right? Like, that's about as easy as it gets. However, I did not get all of the reports changed that field impacted, right? And that was something that we caught through the QA process, because I did not just say, hey, here's a new field, right? And this is the functionality of what that field is doing, but I actually went over to the reports that I knew that field was related to, and we were able to find that through the QA process. So it's kind of widening out your focus during that QA process to make sure the entire user experience has an impact. So we talked about the team to review it, and then the last thing is, let's fix it before the customer sees it. It's 5 o'clock, Friday afternoon. You're getting ready to, go spend the weekend with the family, and we get that dreaded phone call from the customer that something that you just delivered just shut down their whole production, right? none of us want to be dealing with that scenario. And even if it's a very minor thing, the customer is still having to invest stress, a lot, work into that, their communication time back with you. We want to alleviate that for the customer as much as we want to alleviate that for ourselves. And so, really taking the time and doing this quality assurance beforehand, having that be part of the billable process is, again, very valuable to the customer and worthwhile all the way around. So the next thing, how are we doing on time? I can't even see the clock. The next thing is about blocking out my personal time as a developer. So as a developer, we are working on what's called a maker's schedule. A maker's schedule versus a manager's schedule. So as a maker, we oftentimes need to really be able to focus for blocks of time, right? Managers are typically like 1 hour blocks. Phone call, meeting, another phone call, go out to coffee with somebody, have a team meeting. They're very, kind of 1 hour blocks. But as makers, we need to be able to really have focused time. And what I was finding is when I made a delivery to a customer, I was resisting sending them my availability schedule to schedule the next call, right? Why was I doing this? I love talking to our customers. I want the work. I want to be helping them. But what was happening was internally, I was fighting against the fact that I was on a maker schedule, and disruptions can be deadly. A phone call at 2 o'clock in the afternoon can disrupt your entire day, right? So yeah, I see a bunch of heads nodding in the audience, right? You're either thinking about that call, or you need to do some prep for that call, or maybe you have a particularly intense project and you don't even want to start on that project at 9 o'clock in the morning because you know that you're going to get partway through debugging some complex API that you're struggling with, and you don't want to have that get interrupted partway through the day, right? So that project's already hard. I'm just not even going to start it today. It can disrupt your entire day. So what I really had to find was I needed to start to block out my time. So I started moving all of my availability schedule for my customers into kind of blocks of time, and also asked my managers to help accommodate me in terms of blocking out times that we had for scheduled calls and that sort of thing. And for me personally, I was really bad about not even taking breaks for myself. So I actually even scheduled in my breaks to help myself with this. So this is an example. I started using this. I don't use it day to day anymore, but it really gave me a kind of a starting point to keep myself on track. And basically what you're looking at, everything in orange is billable time, everything else is not. And so I've got large blocks of billable time blocked out for me to do project work, to do development work, where I could dive into those difficult projects. And then you'll also notice that I front-loaded my week. Right? So if I ended up, having unexpected things come up, whether it was family or whether it was, kind of an urgent project or something, I wasn't going to be sitting on a Friday afternoon realizing that I still had 10 hours of billable time left to do with just a few hours left to go in the work week, right? So I really front-loaded my billable time so that I had the flexibility if things changed through time. So that was, actually go back, Dan. So with this, I then track my actual time within FileMaker and display that in Dayback as well. So then I can actually see my actual time and how that's kind of lining up against what we have here. So the next piece of this is how do I keep track of the projects I'm working on. As Dan talked about, 3 to 10 hour chunks, that may mean that I'm working on 3 or 4, sometimes even 5 different projects all at the same time in different stages of the project. And that's a lot of stuff to be keeping in your head. So we keep track of all our deliveries in FileMaker and then display that here in Dayback. And what you can see here is, basically, who the customer is, how long we think that the project is going to take, how many hours I've actually worked against that. So again, that's tied into my time tracking that I do. And I can get a very good sense of where I am in terms of being able to deliver those and what promises I've already made to the customers they're coming up. So there's no spooky music in the background of what is it that I am supposed to be working on or that I'm supposed to be doing. The other cool thing that's on here is the analytics graph, and we'll see this as we zoom out here in just a minute. But what that graph is actually showing is the amount of time I have left on projects. So it's, you know, what my estimated time was versus how much time I've actually put into it. What's that remaining time? And that's the graph that we're going to be showing here on the next screen. So this is a zoomed out view of it. What we're going to focus on here is that the green are scheduled projects. Those are ones we have money, we have files, we're ready to go. We've made a promise to the customer. We're ready to be working on that project. The others are kind of discussions that we've had with customers. They're basically the pipeline, right? They're projects that are in progress, maybe still getting some final details and that sort of thing. So that's what our pipeline looks like for work into the future. The orange line is my capacity for a week, right? How many hours can I do billable time? And I can see that threshold line of my capacity. So let's talk about how we use this a little bit. So I use this on a daily basis, looking at the current week to see how many hours I have left remaining that I've promised versus kind of where I am in the week, right? So if that dot is all the way up at that threshold, which is set at 20 hours, and it's Friday afternoon, I'm in trouble in terms of the promises that I've made to the customer, aren't I? Okay, so during that week, I can see that value start to drop. And this is going to give me a really good indication of whether I'm on track for my promises, but also if I need to start to contact customers. We're going a little long. Whether I need to contact customers to start to move those delivery dates. And then if a customer calls me and says I have a 10-hour project, I can look at this instantly and see exactly where I've got capacity to be able to schedule that project in. I can look at that. Anybody on the team can look at it if they're having that conversation to be able to schedule appropriately into the future. And conversely, if I have a dip in my line in the future, I know where I may need to do a sales push or really start to amp up my pipeline projects to get them to that green state so that I've got that continued work as I continue to move forward. So having this information all at a glance is hugely valuable. It just gives me a ton of comfort in being able to know not only where I am currently on my promises and my projects, but then also where we are into the future, both in terms of being able to schedule to capacity and not over. Deep sigh, right? And seeing where we may have some potential dips in order to kind of activate the team and get more projects coming in. So hope that this information was really helpful to you guys. We've kind of gone over time. So we'd love to continue the conversation with you over at our booth, over at the SeedCode booth. We'd love to hear what kind of struggles you've run into, strategies that you've come up with. If you have any questions about how we do things, we'd love to share more information. So I was asked at the end of the session here, if you guys could go ahead and return your headphones when you're ready. Over here to the side, go ahead and unplug them and kind of wrap up the headphones. That will save the staff an enormous amount of time. Thank you very much, you guys. Really appreciate it, and come talk to us.